I am Anirban Chakraborty. I'll be your host for this session. Uh, just like any other webinar, in the beginning, I'm going to bore you with what Font Scientia exactly is and what we are and all these things. So, Font Scientia is essentially a nascent platform which we started just few days back with the objective of popularizing a scientific mindset, ability to think scientifically, to question various things, and not to surrender to the flow of myths and all these things. So you must have all those who have registered for this event must have seen our posters as well, that we advocate for a statement that says never stop questioning. So I hope people who come across us in any way will be able to maintain that, and they won't ever stop questioning. So anyway, that's all Font Scientia is. Coming to today's session, let's welcome our guests. We have Dr. Tirthankar Go Thakurata here as our guest. He is faculty of medical physiology at KPC Medical College, Kolkata. Welcome to the event, sir. And we have Mr. Shobhusati Mishra with us. He was a former teacher at Prometheus School in Noida. Uh, Welcome, sir. Welcome to the event. Okay, so there are few things I would like to mention before we start with the session to the attendees. Number one is, please keep your mics muted and your cameras turned off. We have already given a space for your queries and questions for the Q&A session of the webinar in the Google form by which you have registered. So, but anyways, if you have any other queries, you can type them in the chat box of this particular meeting, and we'll try to address it at the end if time permits. And yeah, I guess that's all. So with this, we can start with the webinar proper. So, examinations have always been a very crucial thing in our lives. Uh, we as students are almost always, forced to think of examinations as major hurdles in our path, things which we need to focus on more rather than anything else. So, as you know, that's the very topic which we are going to discuss in this session as well. So, I would like to pose this question to Dr. Go Thakurata, that when you were a student, what was your view about examination? How did you approach them?
Well, as a student, examinations were very important for me. I mean, I used to think exactly in the opposite way, the way I might be thinking now as a teacher. I thought that every examination is the end of the world. So, whatever examination it was, I would be totally geared up for that. I'll be panicking about that. I'll be preparing. And, as we grow up, we unlearn things. I had to unlearn a lot of things. And one of the thing was school's approach to make you competitive, to make you think that you have to top in some way or the other, surpass others in order to prove your worth. So yeah, I mean, if you talk of me as a child, I was a typical panicking type of nerd who would be studying a lot in order to score marks. Then gradually, even though I unlearned the competitive attitude, I used to discuss things with others, share my study materials with everyone. But this internal competition was there. I mean, that internal competition was there that I have to score better than what I used to score before. So that whether it's good or bad, I mean, that is how my childhood was. And yeah, that was not good, I think. Yeah, that was bad.
Okay. So I would like to ask the same question to Mr. Mitra as well.
Yeah. Okay. But to the contrary, like though I will say that for me the cycle was probably the other way around. Now when I'm sitting here, I thought that I am thinking that maybe I should have taken the exams a bit more seriously. In the sense that I was in a school uh, which used to churn out rank holders. And the first thing was and before that I was in a school where I used to top quite comfortably till grade 3. But then I went to a school where all toppers came, and it was very difficult to convince my parents and others that okay, like here everybody was has been coming who were either toppers or second and things like that. So everybody cannot now top in this school. So it's not really that my performance has gone down because of which I was 30th or 40th or whatever. But also I was somebody who never enjoyed exams, but I took the lessons very serious, classes very seriously, even till university days. And often, normally, we often creep about, okay, this professor is not good, it's such a waste of time and all that. Uh, Now, yes, I can understand. Now we have more access to internet and other ways of resources, but I still never missed any class because I always felt good at that professor is able to compact the entire curriculum in such short lectures so that when I want, I know what to look for. And it was a pre-Google days, like it was hard copies and all that. So for me, I always used to, even if the exam is preponed by one day, I will fail miserably. It was like that because I used to study to explore. I always used to explain to often my friends, but in the exams they always were at least 10 to 20% above mine, but I couldn't ever manage with it. I remember my 11, 12 days in Narendrapur, my roommate once said that, like, I want to tell you something, please don't mind. I said, yeah, tell me. He said that you are not studying at all, that we will not even pass. So I said, okay, there are two possibilities. One is if I don't pass this time the higher secondary, it would be held again next year, so I will take it then. The other option is that maybe I don't pass it this time, and because of some revolution or whatever, from next year this system is scrapped altogether. So even if I top this time, it wouldn't have mattered. So it's okay, like, and he was in such a state of utter shock, he stopped speaking to me for a week. So for me, it's a very comfortable zone to talk about when Archan sent me two question sets. One was from the organizers in the beginning and then from the audience. I started looking at it and looked like an exam paper. And I said that I'm not going to give this exam. So I closed all of it. And I thought, okay, I will just share what I feel about based on how the flow is. So for me, probably the trajectory is entirely the other way. I am in a very comfortable zone now discussing why exams are all scrapped. So,
Okay, so uh, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, it's almost the same case with me. I also don't quite like examinations. I think it's the same case with many people also. Anyways, so uh, Mr. Mitra, now that you are teaching people, now what is your view of examinations? Has it changed in any way, or is it the same?
like I have mostly taught the international curriculum, all the more because I have worked with a lot of teachers in the national curriculum, but I don't have a B.Ed. It was like I wanted to work with children. I left my PhD and came to school education and things like that. So the Indian schools, because with the non-B.Ed, asked me to talk to their teachers, but not give access mostly to the students. And in the international curriculum, I think we have to find a balance. It's not, yes, exams are required, but are we pushing it too much? Are we stressing so much on the exam? Like, like they're too like in the international curriculum often, like there is an improvement exams are more easy, and it doesn't show on your report card that okay, whether you have taken one paper twice. Like once you have cleared it with competence, it doesn't matter whether you have, like, yeah, that doesn't mean that you will take it over 10 years. There are restrictions on that so that it's not too easy. But in our system, mostly, like if I get stuck in one paper, say in a grade 10 exam, okay, I am considered to be a continuing candidate or something. The result will always show that I didn't clear, and it will show, oh, you didn't clear it in one go. How does it matter? So we can always have a system where, like it is sort of marking the child down. One of the very important things uh, in the curriculum is that we don't, like our times, like when we were correct, when our scripts were corrected, often it was given, okay, you didn't talk about this point, -1, or you lose a point, you didn't. So we are marking the child down from a so-called very ideal answer and saying, okay, why are these not there, rather than marking the child up for what the child has produced. it's very important that clearly the international curriculum, now I think the Indian curriculum is also changing accordingly, but it clearly says we never mark a child down. But somehow we are very obsessed with it. And I will take an example from a very real life situation. I always feel that, like it helps to look outside for our solutions or to question ourselves that are we on the right track? Because in a seemingly related area, the solutions might be very well charted out. Like I sometimes watch reality shows, musical programs, right? And a lot of the times I see comments about young singers that okay, uh, she has or he has ruined the song. And when I listen to it, you see that the he or she has really sung it in a completely his or her original way, putting his own music. Maybe it's a 1960 classic, so called. And they say Lata ji ka gana kharab kar diya. Why are we comparing? If we want to listen to Lata Mangeshkar, let's listen to Lata Mangeshkar, not to that child's song and say, okay, was it like Lata Mangeshkar? The child is not supposed to sing like Lata Mangeshkar. And we should appreciate that his song in an original way. So are we also memorizing our answers and trying to put it down, then trying to write something on our own? And are we being appreciated for it? This has to change. Exams will be there. But are we being able to mark the child up for what the child has produced rather than marking the child down for what has been, what the child has failed to produce from what was expected from the child? So that is what I feel is important.
What you're trying to say is that this present system basically highlights what the child lacks, and it does not
Yes.
celebrate what he or she or them possess.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we ask when was it fought? Say a history question. When was it fought? Where was it fought? Who fought? We don't ask why was it fought, and let the child answer based on what the child feels. Somebody might feel it was important that though war may be a good thing. Somebody might feel that okay, war is a bad thing, but in that context it was inevitable. It was the best least evil. Or somebody might feel no, what is a bad thing and no matter what, and they were on the wrong and try to justify, and all of those can be correct. Are we giving that position? Then the exam won't be a fearful thing, right? The child will be very happy. Okay, I want to go and perform. Do we feel that we are? It's a performance that I really look forward to, or are we trying to feel? Are we given a feeling that okay, we have to perform according to others' expectations? So that can change.
So you mean you are stressing towards a more subjective evaluation than an objective one? No.
Absolutely. So there would be places where, okay, it's a fact. It doesn't mean that we don't need the facts, but we can give the child access to the internet and say, okay, just look out. It really doesn't matter whether it was 1825 or 1826. Just check that out. What we want is the analysis part of it. Give the child access to the resources. If the net is there, fine. If not, we can have a cheat sheet. Like, okay, this is the data which we don't have to mug up. It's there. Because when you work in real life, you will be able to access it. What you want is your interpretation. And then there is no right or wrong answer. So that
Okay.
can change.
See. So, Dr. Go Thakurata, your views about examination now as a teacher.
Yeah, I would reflect almost similar things as Mr. Mitra is saying, because you see, just essentially what he said is that the response to an examination is not simulative of the response that we have in practical life to a situation. So it's a very artificial method by which examinations happen. For example, no one in real life, suppose if you're a clinician, no one in real life will ask you the definition of pallor or the definition of a particular heart sound. That is irrelevant. You have to hear it and identify it and interpret it. So now coming to this, you know that when we set an examination, I'm not against examination, but it's very important to set goals or objectives to what kind of domain of skill that we are trying to evaluate through the examination. Broadly speaking, you see, when a child is appearing for an examination or writing a project, there are certain issues or processes that happen in the brain of the child. Now, one such process is known as the processes of meta components. That is the pathways that lead to the project. I'll explain this. The second thing after the meta component comes is the execution. And the third part is knowledge acquisition. Say, for example, I give you a project that you write a paper on the COVID-19 pandemic. So at first, you have to plan, you have to research, you have to acquire data, and this data acquisition should be backed up with analysis, your own perspective building, and then you start writing the paper. So what you do up to this before writing the paper is the meta component of the project. Then you start writing it. And remember one thing, that it's very difficult to isolate a particular domain of knowledge and assess it. For example, I'm just giving you a very simple example. Suppose I want to assess your medical or demographic analytical skill. But how will you write the paper if you don't have knowledge of good English or Bengali or language and syntax? So I'm also simultaneously assessing your language skill. I am simultaneously assessing your writing skill, because writing skill is not same as the speaking skill from neurological point of view. So if we keep so many domains in mind, you will see there is a child who may be very intelligent, very knowledgeable, but might be having some kind of a speech difficulty or writing difficulty or other forms of dyslexia, and can be and the intelligence of that person can be underestimated through the process of examination. Now, with this whole process of meta component processing and executing the project, that is planning for the project and writing the project, you are also learning things that I did not ask you to learn. That's obvious, that's inevitable. You are reading more material than you have to write. This is an important part of learning. This self-learning process is the knowledge acquisition domain. Now, if I want to measure this knowledge acquisition domain, that cannot be done through what you have written. Because at this point, when you are writing the project, you actually know more than what you are writing. What you are writing is streamlined to my question. I have given you a question and you are writing an answer to it. That doesn't mean that your knowledge ends there. So how do we know this knowledge? So there are different ways of analyzing a student's capacity. One way of analyzing a student's knowledge is to set questions in such a way that it hardcore tests knowledge and not analysis. And as Mr. Mitra was also saying, that in some places knowledges are important. We as teachers of science sometimes think that science has to be entirely conceptual. No, science is not always entirely conceptual, and by that I do not undermine concepts. What I'm trying to say is that we have not created the laws of this universe. Some natural or thermodynamic process have given rise to that. So in the kind of reality that we are, even if the multiverse concept is real, in that universe that we are living, it is guided by certain axioms that we cannot change. And those axioms are the so-called universal truths, based on which we analyze, and then we proceed to make new hypotheses, new theorems, new laws or principles. So you see that the key component of natural sciences, I'm not talking of mathematical sciences here, even mathematical sciences, because mathematical science is also not totally without observation. So in order to even do a thought experiment, you are actually applying an analogy to the visible world. So when you are assuming that a photon particle is dividing and moving into opposite direction, you at least are assuming how a real particle will split and move into opposite direction. So the visual analogy cannot be unacknowledged. We learn through the five senses that we have, with whatever little input we get from the environment. We comprehend that, abstractify it, and then reach on to higher principles. That is how we learn. So the knowledge component has to be treated. Maybe it will be 10% of the whole evaluation, but it's there. So you can understand the knowledge component through very objective knowledge-based questions. For example, through multiple choice questions, through fill in the blanks, etc. Then comes the component of comprehension. For comprehension, as Mr. Mitra was saying, the data has to be given. So here we are not testing whether you can memorize and mug up a lot of data. So I can give you the whole lot of normal ranges for a particular medical parameter, give the data of the patient, and then ask you to analyze whether it is right or wrong. So your analysis is tested here, not your memorizing of the fact of what is the normal serum bicarbonate level. Often the questions that we set are mixed, are totally admixed. We give you a patient's data and ask you to interpret without giving the normal data. Then what am I testing? Your analytical skill or your ability to remember the normal range of values for those set of data? If you don't know any of this, your answer will be wrong. So what does a wrong answer indicate here? Your lack of knowledge or your lack of comprehension. So whenever we set questions, the questions have to be very clear from the teacher's perspective also. Finally, a blueprinting of the paper is also very needed. That is, the teacher ideally should solve the paper and see where the difficulty domains lie. The teacher must understand how much time is necessary at a student's level to solve a particular question. So if I club 10 multiple choice question and think that each question will take 2 minutes, that is not the right way of doing it. There are certain questions that can take 2 minutes. There are certain questions where reading the question will take more than 2 minutes. So if examinations are planned in this way, in such a way that ultimately when I mark you, each mark does not only reflect your grade, but your overall development in certain domains. Where looking at the score sheet, I can guide you in future saying that your knowledge acquisition is okay, that can be easily developed by reading more, but your comprehension is lacking. Or the opposite. Your knowledge memory is very poor, but when information is given to you, you can process. So I guess that you are good with the subject. Just read a bit more because there are a few things you need to remember. So if that kind of an objective evaluation, and by objective evaluation, I do not mean the examination has to be objective in nature. The evaluation has to be very objective. Then I think the examination makes some sense. Just setting a few questions with vague action verbs like describe and discuss, and then giving answers according to what you think is the standard answer is not the right way to either conduct examination or take an examination. That is my perspective.
So, I mean, the present state and the present way in which examinations are conducted, they only evaluate how good one is in giving examinations, in appearing for examinations. It doesn't reflect that how good the person knows the subject or something like that. So now in this context, I would like to ask that evaluations are important, no doubt about that. How early should we start evaluating? I mean, seeing that in class 1, or in lower classes, that classes lower than class 1, there are evaluations, there are tests, there are examinations. Might not be that serious, but then they are there. So do we really need to evaluate a kid of that age? I mean, so I would like to start with Dr. Gothakura. What do you think about this?
See, I have no problem again with evaluation. In the clinical department, you always also do clinical evaluation of the milestones of development. That is also an evaluation. But reducing an evaluation to the level of a test is a mockery of the evaluation. That is what I precisely think. Evaluation should be there for understanding the growth. By growth, I mean the intellectual growth of the child. That's quite okay. That can be done from day-to-day assessment. And day-to-day assessment is a much better indicator, more bias-free indicator of development than a one-point assessment that can be done in 2 hours of time. Maybe the child is not feeling well on that day. Maybe the child has some issues cropping up just the day before the examination. So judging on the basis of one-day performance is not the right way to evaluate. So I think that evaluation can be done at a very early age. The teacher must be trained in such a way, and thankfully some trainings are happening nowadays, though not universally, but in many institutions such trainings are taking place, where behavioral evaluation, where other pedagogical skills are being applied, where the teacher understands how to evaluate various domains, intellectual domains of the child, the creative domain, the analytical domain, the memorizing domain. And then it works like this. Suppose every week, based on the week's work, the teacher scores something to a child, assigns a score in the various domains. And of course, it's not possible for the teacher to remember everything. That is where it becomes bias-free. And after 1 year, maybe that is 40 working weeks, maybe, all these 40 scores are summed up. And with that comes the final impression of the teacher of what the child is like now. I think that is a much more better evaluation than what you are saying or suggesting is like having an examination for the students, like asking them the names of some spellings or such and such thing. They really make much less sense. But if evaluations, see, evaluation is also an evaluation of the teacher, of how the teacher is teaching. So the teacher also has to understand this. So when a teacher says that the score of the class has been very poor, it also reflects on his or her own score. So we must start taking responsibility for the scores of the students. And once this happens, the teacher feels responsible for the score. The teacher understands that a lesser score doesn't make him a better teacher. It actually makes him or her a worse teacher.
Yeah, that's nice. So I would like to ask the same question to Mr. Mitra as well. So what do you think about this examinations in too early
Yeah,
classes and all these things?
yeah. I think I am in sync in almost completely with Dr. Mohata Gupta because if we have to, and I have faced it in a way because I often teach the senior grades more, is that we feel that evaluation means testing and it is bad for children below a certain age. There is a feeling. But what happens because of that, they are not ready by the time, and because of no evaluation, I'm not saying testing, one haven't really even assessed that whether the child is ready for the next grade. And I say that if, say, by 2025, somebody has to give, or 2030, somebody has to give the grade 10 exam, one needs to, like, the one of the easiest way to make it less stressful for the child is to prepare the child from as early as possible. So, in that sense, and it is just like how do we evaluate it? Obviously, the child, even in nursery, is doing something, right? Is making something with clay. Can that be recorded? And by the time the child has, so on day one, how the child is making something as a plaything, and by the time it is 2 months later, or and finally after 6 months, if we have those things, can we assess the child's progress so that we can give a child the feedback in a way so that the child can improve, or is it that we can reflect on us as Professor Thakur said that, and I think that's very important that it helps at that stage. It helps us, the teachers, more than the child to give the child feedback. That is one thing. So what we need to do is to have multiple ways of evaluating, not only one pen and paper test. We can record nowadays. Like, yeah, people might say, okay, you have taught in schools which are very elite schools and they have access to resources. But now a smartphone is has penetrated the rural areas also. So it is not that difficult anymore. Let us record in some format the child's progress, and on the basis of that give a report of feedback which will help the teacher at the next level to take it from there. So evaluation or testing is it's a continuous thing, right? And as we watch the child, as we engage with the child, we see how the child is progressing. That is evaluation. It need not be out of 10. It doesn't have to be. To showcase it at the end of the year, we can just showcase the child's progress, like, or give the child that folder, and keep it. And this is how the child has progressed, and talk to the parents about the progress. Because we often say that the parents are very competitive. That is because they are not aware, like of, and because everybody is saying that, oh, you have got 99, my son has got 100, and we start panicking. We need to have, like, whenever we are going for a systemic change, we have to sort of involve every stakeholder in it and engage the parent also in giving the parent the confidence that the child is in the right direction. And by the time I always used to tell my children inside grade 9, 10, for example, that children used to panic in math. Okay, I have got a 1 out of a maximum of 8. I said, don't worry. So if there are 4 semesters kind of, so in every semester, you will have at least one formative and one summative. So by the time from grade 9 to grade 10, before your board exams, you will at least have 4 formatives and 4 summatives. So if you start with a 1 in the first formative, 2 in the first summative, 3 in the second formative, 4 in the second summative, by the time you are sitting for your final exams, you are conceptually clear at the toughest level of questions, and you know that, okay, you are an 8. So the parent, the child got confidence, okay, even a 1 is fine to begin with, because it's a progress, rather than saying, if I have got a 1, I said, no, I will not lower the level of difficulty and help you get an 8 now, and hoping that next time you will be able to get an 8 at a higher level. This is the level of difficulty, this is the target. Start working from a 1, and a 1 is perfectly fine. When it is not fine, maybe a 7 may not also be fine, and I will tell you then. So that confidence, not only with the child, it also has to be talked about with the parents so that they do not panic and start giving private tuitions to mother. I think that engagement has to be there with every stakeholder. That is very crucial. That is everything.
As an extension of that, I would like to say that, why did this obsession with examination evolve in the first place? Among students, among parents as well. In this context, I would like to share a personal experience of mine. When I was in the third standard, before that, till my second standard, my school used to have the standard way of examination: two half yearly examinations and one annual examination. And when we were promoted to third standard, from that very year, they said that we will start evaluating in a more frequent way. We will have short tests, short unit tests, so called 8 or 10 unit tests throughout the year, and then we will get the cumulative evaluation of the students and assess them accordingly. Now, I still remember this somehow, that it was a huge matter of discussion amongst parents, that they were not bothered about what is the cumulative result of the unit tests. What they were more bothered about was, what if when the third unit test is going to be held or the fourth one is going to be held, what if they plan a tour at that time and the child misses that test, or maybe the child can't perform good at that test? So I mean, they were looking into this entire, dividing the curriculum into 8 segmental tests, as they were treating each test as a single barrier to be crossed. So this probably reflects how much we are obsessed with examinations. Like, a single examination should not go waste. Why did this thing appear? How did this thing appear?
So, Anirban, before you proceed, like I will also want to reiterate because I may forget on this. I just was that's what jotting in is that it is not only important to break it down into 10 tests. Are we testing different skills or different abilities through those tests? Otherwise, if it is just breaking like no like the same type of 10 questions in one paper, rather than that, okay, you are giving it in over 10 months. But we are testing the same memory. Only it is a less pressure on the child. You don't have to memorize 10 points at in one go. You have to memorize one at a time. That really, yeah, it makes it a bit easy for the child, but really, it really doesn't enhance learning. It may show the grades up, but as a learning wise, I think like it's a zero then, still a zero. We have to test different skills during these different units. That is, I thought that I wanted.
True, that's true, that's true. But anyways, I mean, why did this? Why do you think this craze about examinations arise? Like, people would showcase their marks, like it's something. Of course, it's something to be. It might be something to be proud of, but mostly parents do these things. Not always, but then I've seen many parents doing these things. That my son has got a 99. Hers has got a 96. So he's not that much of a bright child. He's a dull child. This thing, as if the students are their children are basically race horses. They are horses which they have betted on, and then they are seeing that how fast my one's run. Oh, look, my one's winning. And why did this thing develop in the first place? Why do you think it developed? Also among the students as well. The students are also fairly competitive as marks are concerned. But and without a fair, I mean, without a fair reason. If someone says that they are bothered about their 12th marks because that's going to ensure admission in a good college, or if someone is bothered about the marks they are going to achieve in a competitive exam because that will give them a rank, which in turn will give them a good position, I think it's justified to some extent. But other than that, in non-significant examinations, people are also a lot bothered about how much they score. So yeah, why is
Okay.
that? How do you think?
So yeah. So if I could go on that, like like I feel that one cannot choose between like on this. I think if something is bad, we need to because if we say that like that, okay, like in non-significant examination, then the question will come that what's the point of that examination there if it is not finally going to count? So either we think that this is my personal age, that like I don't know how many of you have been by this age. I have been considered kind of a case study in my relatives and the societies in a long, very early. Why? Because as I said, I studied in a school that churned out rank holders, but today I was a school teacher. So often, relatives in front of me, in front of my parents, have said, and my parents have also been have not defended me in a way. Then, like like it's not to grudge, but they also felt the same. Like they said, okay, like I don't tell. Many have told me in front of me that they have told their children that they should not become like me. Like their case should not become like me, because if this is what they needed to do, like us teaching in some school, why did they have to go to Ramakrishna Mission, Purulia, Narendra, Xavier, Genuine, such and such thing? So in the beginning, I was a little, like, okay, what to tell? Then I said that, okay, like there are two, like, and this is the peer pressure or the relatives pressure. So I always tell my students that when somebody is questioning you, like try to, and nowadays it is all the more important because in the social media, they will troll you, like it's a different day. I said just check first whether they are questioning you to know and understand, or are they questioning you just to question, with a fixed answer in mind. Like they already have it, and are they questioning to question, or are they questioning to know and understand you? If it is to understand you, we will try to respond. Like even if the person has a very diametrically opposite view to what I feel, I know through the conversation it will progress somewhere. But otherwise, it will leave me completely, like dazed or phased out after the conversation, because it was never a conversation to begin with. I felt it would be a conversation. I will go full hog into trying to convince, but the person is not wanting to be convinced or understand it. So the person is just wanting to. So we should be able to make this difference. The second thing is that I feel it is very important that uh, we cannot think that I want to, like, every school, every parent, every student now said we have to stay ahead of competition. This is a very common thing. But I said that, okay. I said, oh, you wanted to be ahead of competition. But then I saw you in the thick of competition. So, but you said you want to be ahead of it. How are you there? Basically, what we meant is that we wanted to be ahead of competitors. Now, ahead of competition means it's a very different thing. We are not going to compete. There are two ways to win, and I always say there are two ways to win a competition. One is to try to stay ahead, so called, but we are always, is the person behind me just too close? The other is to leave competition altogether and do what we enjoy doing. And if it is about being happy and earning what we need to have a sustenance, there will be enough. But if we want the top job, you know, but then we are going into competition, then we cannot crib about it. So we have to understand, and on the same, and there are enough scope. Like, see, nowadays what is happening, I feel that this is my observation. It's not a good bad thing, but this is happening that everybody wants to super specialize. So, but if I look at medicine, I am a completely non-medical person, but this is my experience. When I go with a fever, I don't find any medical MBBS doctor nearby who can give me some. They're not available, and you have to hunt. Probably even for fever, you have to get admitted somewhere, unless otherwise. Like, but in my understanding, the specialized persons would have only attended or patients who have been already referred. And why do we think that unless we do a cutting edge surgery, which is televised or which is on the newspaper, if we can work in a village and ensure that not too many of them have to land up in Calcutta, even for a basic, why can't that be considered success? And even, and I, this is my idea that, yeah, they might not earn as much as somebody doing their surgery, but even their salary in the village, what they get, would have been enough to sustain them. It's not that they won't. So are we ourselves imposing competition on us when, and like when it was not required? And if that is the case, we cannot really, like, I know, like I was saying that, I was thinking that a long back I read that what is a solution, because I understand that this, like, looking at the question, that we are looking for a solution. So I read somewhere long back, to most of us, solutions are answers to a problem, but to a chemist, it is things are mixed up. as a joke. But then when we think of things that are mixed up and we feel, oh, then it's not a solution. No, it's a solution in which all the solutions are there in a mixed up way. And there are already solutions. Are we willing to accept those as solutions? Like, will the patient, the doctor says, okay, this is what you need to do. COVID, you just have to wear a mask when you go out. What is so difficult about it? The solution is there. You know, unless we contract it, then it's a different thing. Yes, but if we all wear the basic thing, but we are all wearing it on our chins and going out, the solution is there. But why are you not? Are we willing to accept them as solutions, or are we thinking that no, no, this is going to like no, so, like impinge on our basic rights? Then we are there where we are. So we have to accept solutions. So either way, like either way, there is a cost. We have to decide what is there. I think solutions are there. We can easily be less competitive. Lot of research has shown that competitive, like the competition doesn't only lead to a zero-sum game, like but collaboration is the spirit, the only way we can work, So, but that is what we look at. We have to get out of the competitive way. We have to be happy with what we are doing, and ensuring that even then enough money will come for us to support ourselves, sustain ourselves, not in terms of it. But if you're eyeing that, and people say, okay, yeah, so I should be happy in the way that I said that, okay, like if say what was the point in going there, or what was the point in, I said, you have not gone there, no, you won't understand. Let me be, I am not impinging on what you think is success, but I am not going to be affected by it. I am happy the way I am. This is something, but the parents have to play a very vital role in this. The parents, we need to talk to the parents that they're, like finally, if there are, everybody wants to target IIT or joint entrance from age of 7, or at least grade 7. Now, at least I know that from grade 7, there are tuition bureaus and all that. Like, do you think that earlier you go, greater the chances there? Still there are 4,000 seats and still there are 4 million people. But if you are right from grade 7 only looking at that, if you are not on those 4,000, you don't know where to go. So why don't we diversify? One can confidently be a very good fashion designer, and it is no less than the doctor. So that is what but our parents are the fashion designer, Dr. Banna. What's the problem? The fashion designer can design that gown that the doctor will wear in the convocation, and that's also equally important. This is somewhere we have to go, right? So that is something that all of us have to, and hopefully, if not our parents, at least the ones who are here today, they will not impose the same thing on their children. Like normally I say, no, like I say, okay, like if my parent was a first generation like learner and had to sustain and get a well-paid job, okay, fine. So, but once they have made that 10 lakh or 10 crore or whatever, now if I impose on there are two ways I can look at it with my children. I can either tell my children I really had to quit whatever I love because I had to bring this up. But and today that you don't blow it away definitely, but you don't have to do it that way. You have the comfort. So if you want to take up music, please take it up. I will support you, but take that very seriously. I will not accept lack of rigor. But you can pursue. I will give you that. That's one way. The other way is that okay, I started from scratch and made it 10 crore. You have to make it 100 crore. Why? Then what was the point in you making the 10 crore? You have to. I felt the same pressure, and just to build on that and make it 100 crore. So this we have to choose what we impose on our children. Do we say, okay, you have to act naturally, otherwise even why 10 crore, even 100 crore, you can blow up in one day in a casino. You won't do that. That will train you in. But if you want to pursue your passion, it's fine, because I couldn't. So that position, I hope the current generation will take it and try to make it less competitive. That is what I say.
Okay. Uh, so I would like to ask the same question to Dr. Gothagor, that why did this obsession arise in the first place?
See, the kind of education system that is running in India, you have to understand that this is a colonial education system. And the purpose of this education was not to educate us, it was to make us fit to join the government services. So, if you see the history of how these kind of curricula were developed, the core pedagogical or learning principles were lacking there. The main purpose was to generate clerks. And this is something that I've been saying over and over again to my students as well. The way medical colleges impart medical education is more like uh, building or creating doctors out of a factory, where every doctor should have the same type of knowledge, should have the same goals in life, should have the same kinds of ethical senses, should not question the concerning truths of the subject. And that is what we say is a convergent subject, where the ideas will all fall into one point. But science is not convergent. Science has to be divergent. And by science, I do not exclude humanities here. I am talking of anything that takes an analytical approach to understanding the reality, if I can call that science. So what I am trying to say here is, say, even from the medical perspective, the subjects I teach, we are here, the curriculum is here to create doctors for the society to meet certain needs and not to create medical scientists. Now, if someone becomes a medical scientist, I would congratulate that student because that student learned it by himself or herself. It is a self-learned skill. The curriculum does not encourage that. This is the reason why the curriculum builds on biases of appeal to authorities by saying that this is correct because this is written in that book. I mean, that cannot be the reason why something is correct. So this appeal to authority is there to authorize certain things as correct, and that correctness has to be uniform, which is sometimes known as standardization. Now, what we are promoting in the name of standardization is a mechanistic standardization. It's like from a factory, all t-shirts will be same in color and will be same in size. That is not the kind of standardization you do with human minds. So the same knowledge can be imparted in 5 different ways and can be imbibed in 5 other different ways, generating 25 different disciplines of knowledge. That is what knowledge means. That is an analytical science. Otherwise, it is not. Now, coming to your question, why are we so competitive? Because the education system that we have been trained under is colonial in nature, is aimed at making clerks, either medical clerks or non-medical clerks, but they are clerks after all. And so the relationship between a good score and job for a long time, pre-independence and post-independence, was inevitable. That was a truth. Something akin to what you were saying, that if I score a good mark or crack a good rank in a competitive examination, I'll be getting a good position, which indirectly ensures a good salary or a good quality of life, a good material quality of life in the later part of my life. Also understand, I will totally echo what Mr. Mitro had to say. The process doesn't begin when you start appearing for competitive exam. The process begins early. So no examination is an insignificant examination from that point of view. So if you don't master your language skills in class 6 and 7, you will not be able to write a good medical essay in your 3rd year, because the language skill matters. If you do not understand elementary algebra or calculus in class 11 and 12, you will not be able to understand various medical equations in the later part of the life. So it's not that the competition begins just before appearing for the competition. If you're competitive from the beginning. This is the reason why people are so drawn to those coaching institutions where tuition for IIT and JEE begin at class 6 and 7. Because they hammer this principle into the parent's mind that the earlier you begin, the more you are aligned into that traffic. So the race becomes more familiar to you. What they don't understand that is, even if you win a rat race, you remain a rat. You don't get promoted to a cat. So yeah, they are running a rat race. They are becoming winning rats and some failing rats, but they remain rats. But the thing is, since this kind of a educational achievement is linked to the salary, to the promotions and many other things, unfortunately, that is why educational achievement always comes in the form of a material reward, and we start taking that as a material reward. And to add to this, understand that the parents of the generation of students who are learning now have been more accustomed to this colonial education. So, I mean, their intentions, their purposes are all aligned to this, that the greater you score, the more you achieve in life. That's a tragedy. And to some extent, the problem is, don't forget that those whom we are calling parents are also teachers to some, and those whom we are calling teachers are also parents to some. So teachers also inculcate this kind of idea, that the more you score, the better you get in a subject, and that is where it, I think, stems from, this competitiveness.
Okay. Uh, since the topic of coaching centers came into the discussion, I would like to uh, ask a question that, given the education system remains same as it is now, how important are coaching centers? Because there are few things about coaching centers which uh, I personally don't quite like. For example, in coaching centers preparing us for the post graduation examinations, post graduation entrance examinations, uh, use of things like mnemonic. Few mnemonics are fairly problematic, but the teachers over there, they do not hesitate to use the mnemonic. I mean, by hook or by crook, they will make you memorize the thing, and they are not bothered about whether the methodology is violating any ethical aspect or not. But then it's doing the job which it is supposed to do. It is making you able to qualify an examination, to crack an examination. So how important is this system, this entire system? I would like to ask Dr. Gotha first, and then I'm
This is
listening
a
to you.
failed system. This is totally a failed system. You understand it in this way. And I will say that even from the position that I teach students in private, I feel that the more number of students who are seeking private help is a direct reflection of how we are failing to teach in the institutions. Maybe that is one big reason, why I never teach the subject I teach in my college outside. Because if my students think that I don't teach well in my college, that can never be something to be proud of, because that is my job to teach there. So similarly, the more number of students who are drawn to a certain type of tutorial, I will prefer this word, because tutoring someone and teaching someone are not exactly the same thing. So that is where the role of mnemonics come, the role of using unethical humor comes, because by hook or crook you have to get things into the head of people. Now, it does help. It does help because the educational and the examination system is like that. If you can mug up a large number of MCQs, you will get more common questions, because the MCQs also are not diversified into different skill domains. They mostly test memory. And when they test conception, the questions are so often repeated that the conceptions can be memorized. That is the saddest part of the thing. So ultimately, it becomes a test of memory. Ultimately, it becomes a test of how many questions you can solve in how much less time. So, if that is the approach, I told you, the response to an examination is not the response to a stimulus in real life. In real life, we will rarely have to solve an MCQ question in, say, 30 seconds. That is not a real life problem. So, the real life decision making problem can be some other kind of decision making, but that is definitely not the kind of problem based on which I am selected to be eligible to something. And since the root cause is here, you have to move backward. The goal, suppose, is to achieve a seat in the IIT or in the AIMS PG seats. The backward role of that is to prepare for the examinations. Now, the examinations are more information centric and time bound. So they become tests of elimination. Since they become so you need tutorials who will help you mug up the information in shorter span of time. Since you need tutorials for that, so is the craze to join the tutorial at an early age. So it's actually the backward process. In order to stop this, the fundamental selection examination procedures have to be changed. Otherwise, this cannot be changed. This will remain as it is.
So the same question to Mr. Mitra as well. What's your answer?
So on this, like I always say that what are tutorials after all? Like I remember long back ads used to come probably from Fiji, like full page ad saying board as a professor of IIT, getting only 6 lakhs. join Fiji, we'll pay you 10 lakhs. Like, are we, that's what I'm saying, that 6 lakh with research, like, but then, like, are we going to say, no, I don't need the 10 lakhs, I want research facilities, rather than preparing for the IIT entrance with a 10 lakhs, somewhere you have to give a no. The other thing is that, okay, like, not only for IIT, people, like, like, there is this concept of, in school, they call it the LBPS, low budget private school. Like, those, they call it public school, basically public school as the private school. Now they have a 300 rupees fees in a little no semi-rural kind of area where there are better skilled teachers in government schools. Why is it that parents still send their kids to those which is more expensive? The government school was free, there was midday meal and everything. Because they say they don't teach there. But then and the continuum of that end up in very elite school where they might even take 4,000 rupees per hour for a teacher, maybe to prepare them for the board exams or for things like that. Now my idea is that like finally like they may say because school may they don't teach and all that, but still education is a public good. And private tuition, when you look for private tutor for my child, whether I can afford with difficulty or not, with not with less of difficulty, we are trying to essentially look at a private solution to a public problem, and that can never be the solution. So now, but then this is a very tricky area because I know that a lot of people say that education is free or not, but yes, but we need infrastructure. Now you see that the amount of money we spend on private education, tutors, tuitions, and all that, and we don't question the public education system in school because okay, we have accepted it as a no, is our fate that we just go there for because of the government we have to appear for the exams, board exams from a school, right? So we get them, but we are actually learning the tuitions. That's why we can go for a marriage ceremony for 10 days even in the midst of a school session because that's not important. Now we are essentially looking at that rather than that the amount of money we spend on private education as a collective, even from the poorest person who gives 50 rupees as tuition fees for monthly to their teacher, to those thousands paying who pays in thousands, is the same problem. If we pay a fraction of that into a public education system and then ask questions that now that we are paying, why are we not getting what we are expected to? We can get as a collective a much better day with greater accountability. We also have to question ourselves that are we trying to look for private solutions to public goods, not questioning why are we not getting what is supposed to be a public good. We have to be careful. We have to be blamed for it. We are even now, I think, like I was looking at some a data, World Bank data on investment on public education. We are still ranked 145. Yeah, like we want to be a global power. We spend 3.1% of our GDP when countries Cuba spends 12.8%. But we have enough money to spend for religion, for temples, for fighting over what you eat rather than fighting for whether both of us have food on our plate. So we ought to be blamed if we are not asking the right questions, if we are allowed to be swayed away by non-issues, thinking that's what the root problem is. We cannot be so gullible. Like we have to question education has to be a public good, end of it. Medicine has to be a public good, end of it. It cannot be private 10 systems. Like yes, if you have 10 systems, let us
Uh,
ask that okay,
is it
like
just me or is
yeah,
it inaudible to all of you?
yeah, sorry. Huh?
No, it's
No,
audible.
sir is audible.
So is it okay? Yeah. So I think that somewhere this requires a systemic change and asking them the right questions rather than trying to look for okay, like if I'm getting stressed, there are two ways. Okay, if I'm getting stressed, I can consult a psychiatrist how to come out of it. It may work or may not work. But as a collective, we can raise the larger question that do we have to undergo or go through a system which will give us stress? That choice has to be ours. And I always feel that it's time that we question ourselves also that to what extent we are to be blamed for the mess that we are in. As a collective, not as an individual. And try to address the issues or
Am I
get them
audible?
addressed. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, Anirban, I can hear you.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, you're audible, Anirban.
Yeah. can hear him, but maybe from his end there might be some issue there.
Hello.
Ah,
Sorry for the
he joined.
technical glitch,
Ah,
everyone. Please bear with us for a few minutes.
yeah, yeah. Before he joins, like I think in the
Can
chat
everyone
box.
hear and see me? Please write in the chat box if you can hear and see me. Someone please write in the chat box.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Mitru, you were saying something. Probably there was
Yeah.
a network error in between. So,
Hmm. I think others probably could hear me. I was saying that somewhere we also have to ask the right
Mr.
kind of
Mitru,
questions. Yeah. Am I not audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Ah, Anirban, can you hear me now?
uh, I think Mr. Mitru got disconnected. Just give us a few seconds to check. Uh,
I
just
am saying.
sorry for the disruption. Very sorry. Okay, sir's here. Mr.
Ah,
Mitru is here. So you were
yeah.
saying something. So
Yeah, so I have probably responded in a way that I am saying that we have to push for systemic changes uh, as a collective, ask the right questions,
for some
prioritize
reason,
what
I
our
can't hear
interests are.
Mr. Mitru talking.
Also, can you help us? Like, I think is he the only one who cannot listen to me?
I think so. We'll just take 5 minutes to solve this.
Yeah, yeah, fine. No, so in between, like as we are looking at it, I think he will leaving and rejoin would help. Like I was seeing in the chat box that Hardik has said that in the analogy proposed by Dr. Thakurta about rats and rat races, what is about a winning rat, above a winning rat, or the
Yes, sir.
cat as he puts it. Yeah, like no, like Dr. Thakurta will will respond to it, probably, but I was thinking of a poem I really like it. I forget the name right now, Nisa or Kazimi or somebody. Like he was a Syrian diplomat, but he was quite a famous as a poet also. In one of his poems, like pieces he had written, I searched for men of yesterday, but all I found were frightened cats, fearing for our souls from the authority of rats. The cats have actually taken a back seat now, and as Professor Thakur was putting, it's the rat race, and the rats are all on the top, and the cats are now on the back foot, fearing that whether we should exercise our A or should we at least disclose that I am a cat. Like that's what the system has like imposed on us, that a fear that you are a minority, right? So I think that we need not be above anybody else. No, like this whole idea of why do we have to have a pyramidal structure and one at the top? Why cannot have a tabletop? Coming back to a reality show, kind of an example, I use it as an anchoring context. Why is it that one has to finally win? You know, like we have a bunch of 8 very good singers or performers. Why cannot we just have a festival where all of them perform different skills, different types of dances of songs? Why is it that among them one has to win it? Because as a society we need all the 8 type of dances. So often the problem comes when all the 8 are required, but we still say one has to win that, and we have to tell who is the best. And you know where it starts. How many of you are here? If I can just ask as a rhetorical question, who has never been asked as a child, who do you love more, your father or your mother? You know what the competition begins. Is it a question that should be asked? Do we really need to have a competition among the two? But we are so competitive that as relatives, as we ask, even as a parent, I ask often that do you love me more or your mother more? Why do we give such choices to the child? Is it to prepare for the competitive space? You know, so where competition begins. And they think like this is how, like, no, this is and that's why do we cannot we have a tabletop where all of us are playing different roles? You know, like making the idol, the finally the person who comes and paints the eyes. One can say, okay, is it a 2 minute job? Is it this kind of or somebody has worked? No, every job is equally important, right? It doesn't always you cannot always evaluate based on the minutes taken or the hours taken or the so as a collective, are we getting there? That would be the spirit. That is collaboration. And all medical, all research, any kind of research, if you even look at in a competitive space at the Nobel Prizes over the last many decades, like I think the sciences, there is rarely a single winner anymore. Like either it is two people or three people working in the same lab, or sometimes the one is working sitting in Tokyo, one in Los Angeles, one in London. You see how collaborative it is becoming. But the problem is that finally we realize that without collaboration nothing can be there. But in the selection method, we look at a very competitive way. Like who all those who individually won the race are brought together and said, now you are the best in the group. You are the so hence you would be the best to collaborate. No, those three people may not have ever learned collaboration because they have already always competed. You know, like in economics, they say micro optimization always doesn't lead to the macro optimized solution. If everybody is maximizing individual benefits, it will not lead to a collective benefit. And we are now gradually, even companies are recognizing, they are saying, no, we want people to collaborate. But what was your selection process, sir or ma'am? No, we had a competitive exam and the top 5 were chosen. So we cannot, they will often fail to collaborate, or you have to train them for 2 years on the benefits of collaboration. So we have to address this issue.
Okay, so continuing with the discussion, very sorry, there was a network error in my part, something happened. So anyways, I would like to end the main session with this question, and then we'll move on to the Q&A part. This question is, given the present educational system, I mean, let's just assume that nothing is changing for, a considerable amount of time. What are we students supposed to do? I mean, what are we supposed to do? Yeah, it's a fairly open-ended question. So I would like to ask Dr. Gothapurtha first. What do you think we are supposed to do?
You're on mute.
Sir,
Am I audible now? Okay.
Yes.
yes.
So, study-wise, one thing I should say, see, you have to sustain yourself and you also have to be happy. So do whatever is necessary to sustain your living and be happy. That is the key, I think. You were asking how we can be out of the rat race. The way to be not a rat is to not run for the race. So that race is not important. Getting an honors in a subject is not important. Understanding the subject is important. Getting a score that is very high is not important. But earning your own bread at the end of the day and being happy with who you are as a human being, as a person, is all that matters, because everything is futile. Maybe 100 years down the lane, this episode will be forgotten. I will not be there, and I don't expect anyone to remember me also, because that is how people die. People don't die of diseases, they die of being forgotten. All of us will be forgotten, and we will be remembered as people who we were not. So you will remember certain facets of me, which were maybe 5% of me. And then only that 5% will be glorified to show what kind of a good person I was, because everyone is good after the person dies. So I will also be a good person after I die. But then that is not the kind of person I was. There were other facets that I never disclosed, so they never became public, and so that never became a component of who I am. So we will all be forgotten. So let's just live the life as long as the 5 senses permit us this consciousness. Be happy, be responsible to others, don't harm others unnecessarily into their freedom, and just live your life the way you want to be. We are not a property of our parents, and our children are not our property. We should be happy that they are sharing their human life with us. They are acknowledging us with some designated names or identities. And with that gratitude, we should live. That is my principle of living.
Okay, Mr. Mitsu, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so this is what I also agree with, but I will also give a very, like a so-called tip on this exactly, rather than going philosophical, other than that, because I'm always a philosophical person, but I will try to address it in different way. But look, so right, so there are two, even for the exam, like I know a lot of people, like with exam papers easily available, and I have also been as a teacher often in many schools told that when I'm about to teach introduce the course, like, did you, the head or they ask, did you look at past papers? I said, why should I look at past papers so early? You know, because that means the syllabus becomes the past papers. I said, but they are going to give a future paper, not the past paper. So, and now even if the teacher is not teaching that way, like this these days, it's lucky you are luckier than we were. Every generation probably will get more access in that sense if we utilize it properly. You can access resources. Even if the teacher you feel is not the optimal way, you are teaching in a way that you want to. So I always say that try to understand the concepts. If it's a 2 year course, 1 year and 9 months, you can try to understand concepts. Once it is covered, look at the past papers, the type of question in the last 3 months. That way you are conceptually sound. Even if the paper doesn't follow a past trend but a future trend, you will be able to address it much better. So yes, you will look at for exam, like at the exam, but you don't start learning in why do in nursery if you are going in and for a that why have you come to school? I want to become a rocket scientist. I think it's too early. Somewhere like that is not important. Like so conceptualize it is very important to understand the concepts. Out of a 2 year program, 75% to 80% of the time first get it. Last 2 months, last 20%, you can always go to and look at what are the type of questions that are coming. Are we equipped? If there are gaps, try to get the help. I think that would give a much more, like a the solution. And as parents, like if there are or next generation parents, I will what Professor Dr. I really like no in so much in sync with it that neither our parents nor our children are our properties. Like often we confuse love for our child with love for compliance. Am I happy with my child because the child is happy and achieves something which I may not even have considered worth it, right? Or is it that I am happy with my child because the child has fulfilled my desires or what I wanted the child? So, like never confuse the love for the child with love for compliance. Love for compliance doesn't make you a proud or a good parent. Everybody loves compliance, authority. But a love for a child really has to be to see that what the child wants. And as I said that I had struggled, I had to forego my dreams. I don't want that to happen and unleash that further on my child. So that is something we can always, whether as a parent, whether as a elder brother or sister, we can try to make it more. That is what matters, and so that at the end of it, everything else will go. It is important that we are happy. Otherwise, all our money will be spent on consulting somebody to see how we can come out of this abyss. And there's a saying that do whatever you love to do, then do it better than others. Enough money will come, if not too much money. And you can still say that, but you are still saying that do it better than others because that's your passion. Better than others, compared to better than others, I will at least say that you will do that better than what other things you would have done, which is not your passion. And there is enough scope to do it, right? Though people might feel that no, I wanted to become a literature person, but I went into medicine. Okay, fine. Like you had to at that point of time. Even now, you can come back to literature. By not quitting medicine altogether, but we can spend fewer hours on medicine. Now go into only those cases where you are required really, and try to pursue literature also alongside. And that scope is opening up, right? So we should try to explore and try to make it, and gradually change will come. Maybe next generation will get it. No, a more acceptable or more tolerant adults. What we need is a more tolerant adults. And as Popper said that the only thing we should be intolerant about is intolerance. Everything else we should be tolerant. That will make the world, like all these issues, I think will dissolve if we are staying in a more inhabitable space, a more tolerant world. And unless I am forced to do what I don't want to do, we should not force others to do what they don't want to do. That is what.
Okay, so that's very nice. Okay, so with this the session proper end, so we will move on to a few questions which were asked by the audiences in the registration form which they filled up. Many of the questions, I guess, have been covered in this session as well. The few which remain, uh, which are not yet discussed, we will go through them quickly. Let me just see the questions once. There was this interesting question, which is of not exactly relevant to this session, but it is to some extent. Someone has asked that uh, how do you think the pandemic has affected the existing educational system? Do you think we should stick to online learning even after the pandemic is over? So I would ask Mr. Mitro first. What is your view on this?
I always prefer the physical space a lot. Like that. I remember that the first time like, last year when this suddenly became a in thing, and I was with a school which was already technologically very at an advanced level. It's not that they had to somehow set that up. It took them half a day to set this entire system up and all that. Even there, I just said that I just asked at the end, like the children in grade 9 who are going to grade 10, that how did you feel about this kind of session? Like, no, you said that no, we learned everything was fine, but still, like physical classroom was better because then you could have seen our anxious faces and realized that we have not understood. So that is what the human side
I
is.
see.
So that cannot be replaced, and that was kind of a. But on the other hand, it can be a hyper mode. But like I think the online mode is a, more democratic in a way. Given if the access to resources is that, which is a crucial issue, that one teacher can reach out to many students at some level, right? It is no longer in that sense bounded by 20 students, 40 students. So like one can reach out. Like we are having, and they can join from anywhere. Like today's meeting itself, it can be. So it can be. It could have been a classroom as well. But what I felt is that in this kind of a mode, it is very easy to work with collaborators. Like if the student wants to learn, nothing like this actually. And yeah, we can have like that's how even if the school reopens uh, hybrid model, we can have the lab sessions, but we can have a mix of this, because here what happens is that those who are willing to learn don't get disturbed. But the flip side is, so you can expect that in senior grades, maybe in the medical classroom, one can think of like, okay, there won't be students who will be disruptive in a way, but if they disrupt, okay, we can mute the person, like throw the person out of the meeting but those who are not, but as a child, if the child is not wanting to learn, the role of the teacher cannot be that, okay, he doesn't want to learn, so out. So for those kind of children, it is very difficult to teach in this space, right? And then that's why it is. And what is collaboration? Many feel that collaboration is also again an adult skill. But I say no, collaboration doesn't mean working together and giving the similar inputs. Like collaboration means helping each other out. And sometimes just remaining shut is means that you are actually a great collaborator. Right. I said that okay, collaboration doesn't, like normally we say okay, it was a mute classroom, that it was only going on teaching and learning, and the child was a passive recipient. Sometimes that is also important. That like for 10 minutes, listen to me. So collaboration doesn't necessarily mean that two students pouring two different ingredients into the test tube. Collaboration also means that if one is pouring something, the other doesn't disrupt it by putting something else which shouldn't have been. So if that is the case, then I don't, I have, and even in math, like, as I said, like, unless the physical part of it, lab-based science, those parts, online is fine, provided they collaborate. Actually, you can speed up the process. It's easier to record the session so that if you don't understand, you can in the evening go back and watch it and see that, okay, like, yeah, okay, this is the point I didn't understand. And tomorrow I can ask that question. So things that which is easy, that you don't have to bother about taking down the notes. And like I had a professor who, the moment we used to try to read in St. Xavier's in my undergrad, like if we tried to make our notes, he used to say, you cannot listen to me and write, take notes at the same time. Listen to me now, make notes later. In undergrad, it was very difficult. For the again, like like from memorization, rote learning, we are moving to a different day. If he was in university, probably I would have enjoyed his teaching or benefited from it much more. But with the recording that is done, right, you really don't have to record anything. You have to listen, discuss, go back, watch it again. and see if there are gaps, come back. So it is a tool if we utilize it properly. But then if you are putting, like, no, like you're saying my camera is not working, and then you are actually playing a video game or a computer games, then it's very, with that child or that student it is very difficult. But normally, like even in a regular class, often children used to say, if I say, okay, why didn't you pay attention, they often used to say, sir, he was talking to me. So I used to say, I was also talking to you, right? You made a conscious choice whom to listen to. So why did you decide to listen to the other person and not to me? So yes, he was talking to you, I will talk to him about that. But you cannot blame you're not listening to me because he was talking, because you made a conscious choice to. So we all need to be, in a way, it destroys the hierarchy. But we have to collaborate and then it would work fine, and we can always have a hybrid thing. Even in classroom, I might want, okay, let us today show something or do it in this manner. Because no, we have tools to we can share a file easily and share with you and we can distribute them. Like, see, physically it is difficult to have so many classrooms, right? But in a Zoom meeting, you can always distribute them into breakout rooms and have team things being done, collaborate in groups, and then come back and share. So there are advantages of it, which was not possible in a physical classroom. Because even if you put them in 10 different tables, one would overhear the other, or no, they will get disturbed by the other's discussion. So there are pros if we use it properly. Not like we used to have the, they say, no, ki bigyan Abhishap na Ashirwad. It is no, it's the same thing now. How we use it. That would help.
I see. And Dr. Gotakurata, what's your view on this?
Yeah, like pretty much the same. The pandemic has shown us new ways of learning, new ways of teaching. So I think that should be incorporated to the existing good ways of teaching. So it's not that we have to shift totally to this method of teaching, but since now we are all familiar with this, this can become a parallel method, one of the adjuvant methods to the existing system.
Okay, I'll go to the next question. There are two questions which I think are similar. One says, all along my BSc, I have studied theory-based subjects. Now, while appearing for integrated PhD courses, I am facing application-based questions where I have to apply my theory-based knowledge. Now, how should I approach these types of questions? How should I prepare myself for a completely different study method that I'm just being introduced to? This is one. And the second one is very specific for the medical curriculum. It goes like, will it not be hard to approach clinical case based questions in this situation where we are not being able to do the clinics and visit the hospital? So I think what it basically reflects is having a good theoretical background and then how to apply that in a practical perspective. So Dr. Gotakurata, what do you suggest?
For the first question, I should say that, yeah, it is true that most of our training in the general stream is theoretical. So when you are going for a specific PhD program based on the topic of your PhD, it's always easier to approach the subject if you do a 3 month or 6 month internship under someone with that particular subject. That always helps. That is true for any subject. So work under that specialty, whatever specialty you want to work with in a lab. If it is not a paid job, then affordable, go for it. At least the experience will be the payment that we'll be getting. So that will help you a lot to design your project. Coming to the second question regarding the medical curriculum, see, of course, there are limitations now that we cannot show you clinical cases as frequently as we can. But there is something that I'd like to share here. And this is I consider very important for all medical students. Medical examination is not just based on palpation or auscultation. There are other ways of examination also. So the teacher has to make a conscious effort so that the clinical cases can be shown to you. From my personal experience, audiovisual aid assisted clinical examination is far, far better and easy to grasp than actual human demonstration without an audiovisual session before. So of course we have to touch the human body. We have to hear how the particular sound sounds like. But with the advanced digital technology nowadays, holding clinical classes online is not a problem. But as online classes require a lot of motivation, so the student have to be motivated to attend that. I'll just give you an example. Most of the skin diseases are examined by inspection. So most diagnosis is from history and inspection. We don't even have to palpate for most cases. You can diagnose vitiligo or psoriasis with inspection alone. So if a teacher uses audiovisual aids like a simple PowerPoint or a clinical video to explain and demonstrate that, I don't think that will be a problem. But the zeal to teach should be there in the teacher, and also the enthusiasm to learn should be there in the student. Not going to the clinical world is absolutely not an excuse not to be clinically sound. There are so many clinical skills that can be easily understood online. There are only a few that have to be actually studied hands-on. For example, learning X-ray, learning CT scan, learning MRI scan, learning ECG does not require a bedside exposure. That is my opinion.
Okay. And Mr. Mitro, what would you like to say about this? I
Like,
mean,
can you just, I was listening to him and I forgot the main, what was the question? Like, if you,
yeah, I
the,
mean, the basic question was someone
okay,
said
yeah.
that the person all throughout his
Yeah,
or
so
her
okay, so
belief.
from theory to, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So in this,
theory
I
to
will
practice.
share a very, yeah. So as I said in the beginning, like I have been teaching in the international curriculum, but my background was West Bengal State Board, right? And which was like, like theorems we had to do, but here they say, okay, like from right from grade six, if not before that, they're given access to calculators, for example. They're not asked to prove this theorem. But my experience is that, and so there is a lot of talk about, like, okay, CBSE or Indian curriculum is rote learning and this is application based, conceptual, and all that. But I say application of what? Application of theory, right? So, like, if somebody, unless somebody is thorough with the theory, yes, it would have been much better if alongside the theory right from earlier stage they were also exposed to the practical aspects of it. But if the theory is sound, this is my experience, I will say that it won't take much time, as Professor Thakur said, that if you can get access to like an internship where the practical aspects are shown, if your theory is in place, it won't take long. I always say this, that like somebody trained under the theory based approach like CBSE or whatever Indian curriculum, if that part has been properly covered, adequately covered, it might take 3 months, 1 month to 6 months to adapt to an international curriculum. And I'm not saying about teaching, I'm saying even if you go abroad, like for studies also, you may face the same issue. Like that approach. It will, but if your sound things are sound in place. But the other round is very difficult. If you have already just you used it and thought that I've got all the application skills, you cannot backward understand the reverse engineering, you will not get the theory, right? So if you know theoretically how a microwave or a refrigerator works, you can visit sometime a factory where it is being made and understand it much earlier. But if you know how to operate a microwave and you think, okay, like I'll just read up and be able to construct make one, that is not going to happen. So I think that you are not really at that great a disadvantage. Yes, like as I said, if it was earlier, then even these 3 months you don't have to spend now. But I think even in our top research institutes, also compared to places abroad, like people say, because of lack of resources, fewer resources, we get less exposure to the practical aspects. But still, once from our top universities, like or the institution, technology and other, they go abroad to study. I have not come across too many cases where they couldn't cope with it, right? Because the theory is in place. So I don't think it would be a major disadvantage, provided that those 3 months you get and get that idea so that you can make the connections. After that, you can make your own connections once you know how connections are made. And I don't think that would be a major issue. But your theory has to be thorough. I always bank on that. I'm an old school in that sense. Like if your theory is not in place, application of what? If your theory is in place, you can now start, okay, let's look at application, even if it's 2 years late, fine. But your theory is in place, You won't have to spend those 2 years. You can do it in 2 months.
Okay. So I think that's pretty much all of the questions which uh, came to us. So I guess this is the end of the session. Uh, I'm very much thankful to Mr. Mitra and Dr. Gothakurata for joining us in this session, and I thank the attendees as well to attend the session to listen to us talk. Few things I would like to say about, few basic things which are always said after any webinar. Please keep following our Facebook page for various updates about next sessions and various events that we are going to organize. And yeah, that's pretty much all. And we'll share a feedback form in the WhatsApp group. Please let us know whether you like the session or not, or anything and everything about the session. So yeah, that's pretty much, I guess. So thank you, everyone. Good night, and never stop questioning.